comments, but I'm going to start anyway, otherwise I'll be here forever just staring at things that don't mean anything. So I've got here with me a Umber Hawk thing. What do they call it? Umbrel something or other, the new Games Workshop model. And I'll show you what it looks like, because at the moment it's just on a plastic sprue, so you can't see it. And all I'm going to do is spend like half an hour clipping it off the sprue and then making it in front of your very eyes. So if I just switch over to my Raspberry Pi computer, you can see there it is. So if only I knew what it was called though. Let's have a look. It's from the Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress range. Dreaded Ambull, they call it. So it's basically a Dungeons and Dragons Umber Hawk, isn't it? And I can see what they've done is, I'll go back to me for a moment, Black Magic, GoPro. Yeah, so you can see what they've done is they've basically added extra holes and things to the arms and legs to make it look like something different than an Umber Hawk, when actually it is the same thing. Of course, Games Workshop produced one back in the 1980s, so that's probably why they've tried to make it look a bit different to avoid any IP issues with the whole Wizards and Dungeons and Dragons licensing. They've also put it in a box set that's really expensive, so you have to buy a box set to get it. And look at it, it's a tiny sprue, so it's a really high cost model really to get into, because if you're not into the Blackstone Fortress game, you've got to buy all that box set and this for no reason. So it's kind of an expensive model for a bit of plastic. So anyway, I'll zoom in so we can see what's happening below us. Right. So once that lighting's adjusted. So what I've got here to show a sort of close-up on things is one of the old Umber Hawks too. So this is one from the 80s of mine. It's a metal model, and again it's a proper Games Workshop one. It hasn't got the best of paint jobs on it, but it's the old Umber Hawk model that they did for years. I think you could use it in 40k and Warhammer Fantasy, but it was more of one of the models in the ranges that they had, which sort of supported Dungeons and Dragons. They did quite a few models, red dragons, green dragons, and things that Games Workshop backed and produced when they were more sort of focused across the industry for role-playing and war games. So that's the Umber Hawk. I've had this one from the 1980s or so, and so I know it's an original, but I've seen lots of these on eBay. They seem to come up every couple of weeks, but I'm a bit dubious of those. I think they're just people that have made cast copies and sell them as vintage models, because there surely wasn't that not enough around to have these for sale nearly every month on open sale. I think they're probably copies. But given they're probably, even as a copy on eBay, they're still cheaper than these new plastic ones from Games Workshop, so it might be worth looking out for them. So again, in terms of height comparison and everything, compared to that early one, you can see it's quite a bit more sizable, the new one. But this is a weighty one again. Some people prefer plastics, don't they, to metals, but let's get on with it. So what I'm going to do is zoom out a bit so we can see a little bit more going on, just to explain my gear around here. So I've got here the side cutters. These are Tamiya side cutters with a nice blade. And I've had them for a few years, but they're specifically designed, that they do them for the various Gundam type models and various robot model kits you get in Japan. So they're a really nice clean pair of cutters. And I also have with me one of these Swan Norton Type 3 blades, which I use to trim off little bits of flash and things on or mold lines on the model itself. So I don't have the guide here before me, because I stupidly took this out of the box and I don't know where I've put all of the guide, but I'm not going to put it on the base that it comes on. And these plastic bases, which I use with the round lip to match it to my older model here as well, they have like a punch out area that you could punch into underneath these circle things, but given this is plastic, it's going to glue really well onto that base. I don't think it needs that peg. I don't know if you can see it there, but there's a little peg on the bottom of the foot, which you could put into that hole. But again, I don't think it needs it. It's a large model, but once it's bonded down with that quite large space under its foot, it's going to go on okay. So let's go in a wee bit further and just make sure I've got things in focus for the right level there. Yeah, so there you can go. Again, you can see there's the bottom of the foot, and it does have a peg that you could put into the base. And I'm probably not going to use it. I think I'm just going to glue it straight on when I get to that stage. And it doesn't look like to be an awful lot to it. I mean, the body, the back, it looks like there's an extra claw there to go on, and then some pieces that go on the side as well as the head, of course. So let's get clipping it out. So anyway, as I was saying earlier, I don't play Blackstone Fortress, and I don't really play many of the Games Workshop games at all, but I do like their model kits and their models. So from a perspective of building them and using them in games like Dungeons and Dragons or other skirmish games, you know, I don't play 40k, although I do have a set of the rules somewhere, and but it's not from like a dislike, really. It's just I don't have any friends that play it. But, you know, you need to be in a kind of community, don't you? Or if you need to be keen enough to get yourself into a community down the shop or a store to play. But it's not my bag, so I tend to enjoy doing the kits like these, and then painting and building the models more than I do playing the Games Workshop style games. Yeah, but this will get a showing. This will come out in a Dungeons and Dragons game. I think that's now free. The head is nearly free. So there, let's zoom in on that and have a look at the detail. Yeah, so you can see very fine detail around the mouth parts, and it's got those sort of segmented little eyes. It's quite a nice kit, really. As I say, it's just a shame they sell it in almost like a box set, where you get the set of rules and expansion to Blackstone Fortress included. Not sure if that's a claw or a foot. I'll work that out soon. So I've not been doing live streaming now for 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know if it's because I've been paralysed by the news, because it has been a bit overwhelming, really, in terms of the virus issues. And now I'll tell you what I've been doing. I know why I haven't been doing it. I've been in the garage because I've been doing a set of new terrain for Grunt's 15mm, the other set of rules that I've written, and every Sunday I've been in the garage basically building some terrain. So it's been hot wire foam cutting, gluing, using expanded foam to glue acrylic onto various terrain boards. And I don't have an easy way to show you photos of the progress on that, so I won't bother, but I will do that another time. As I say, this isn't a massive kit, and it doesn't have a lot of parts, so it's not like a truly complicated beast to put together. And because I've got half an eye on trying to record what I'm doing at the same time, I'm probably missing the odd things and not going through as thorough as I would do normally. So the main torso trunk here, it's quite a nice kit. Let's zoom in again. You've got these unusual kind of like maggoty worm things coming out here. And this, as I said earlier, in terms of it looking like the original old school Umber Hulk, which is kind of a fat, chunky looking one anyway, compared to what WizKids have done new versions of this now, and they're a little bit taller and skinnier. Whereas this one does look like it's something that could chew its way through a mine wall, doesn't it, in terms of its bulk? Very hulkish. And yeah, what they've done is they've built on, if I show on there again very quickly, they've built on these sort of panels on the side, which look like some kind of encrusted honey stuff where these maggots are living, which is, I guess, their way of avoiding the IP of the Umber Hulk that comes from D&D. Yep. So the whole thing is a whole load bigger, isn't it? Look at that. That's just the torso, so it's a lot more dynamic a model. I mean, I like these retro, so they're called old hammer style Warhammer models, but this one looks quite stunning. Of course, it's the other thing about Blackstone Fortress is it is a science fiction game, isn't it? And this leads me on to a little topic actually of interest in a sort of train spotterish type of way. And that's that quite a few recent boxed games from Games Workshop, when I've seen them, they have models that you look at and you think, well, that looks like it could be fantasy or it could be sci-fi. It's almost like there's a hot steaming kettle at Games Workshop of ideas that they're trying to get out, and they wrap them up into box sets, which means they may grab a few ideas from a fantasy range or a sci-fi range. And this definitely, with these maggots, feels more fantasy than it does sci-fi, even though Blackstone Fortress on its own is a sci-fi game box set. So these things, I think they're like little extra bits and pieces. They're going to be on their own bases, so they have slotter bases that go on individually. I would use the sort of traditional sized round slotters for these. I'm really not having a lot of joy with that. Yeah, but there you go. It's like let's zoom in on that to get a close inspection. If I can get there. Yeah. So very tiny maggot pile. And not bad. I mean, why has it got a hole in the middle? There must be some other bit that goes on top of it. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. So these sections here are like an individual little maggoty creature, ripper. It looks like a shredder or a ripper. That's what I'm going to call it, even though it's probably got a completely different name. And that thing goes into this sort of pile of spawn. Don't know which way around it goes. I'm not having much luck with that. Maybe that's the wrong one. Maybe I'm making this up. No, there you go. I can see how that goes. So it's quite raised up. There it is. So that would go in its own individual base. And say if you're using it for skirmish games or Dungeons and Dragons or something outside of Blackstone Fortress, where you haven't got these sort of mini token models, then obviously you can use it for anything you like. Some kind of insect swarm slash. It could even be a kind of, I know it is very insecty, isn't it? A baby ankh or ankheg or whatever those are called. Ankhengs? I don't know. In Dungeons and Dragons, that could get away for that. And you get two of those on the sprue. So I suppose, even though it's an ultra expensive kit when you buy this with all the rules in there, at least you're getting a couple of other bases of models, even though they are kind of small. This one I'm even more unsure about having glued it on there correctly, but that's an interesting little pose for such a small model. Yes. Again, on a kind of bit of rock, which is completely contradictory sort of with the sort of sci-fi feel again, isn't it? That the model itself might be on a spaceship or something along those lines, but here it's represented with kind of rocks or crystals, I guess. And that one sits nicely on there in terms of how the legs are built on. And then there's another, I've seen this one, if I flip actually over to the Raspberry Pi and wiggle the mouse, you can see on there that there's a kind of a rock formation on the base, and I think that is this thing here. So, I mean, that's a base detail. Do I want to put it on there, or do I have to put it on there? I don't think so. I mean, it's, again, as I was saying, I'm going to lay this directly glued on. I wouldn't use the plug on that to put that on top of the, I mean, this base here, which you can see has the pegs. You can sort of stick a blade through there, wiggle it around to clean out that peg, and then allow you to put it on directly on there. So you'd then be pushing that model in to the peg hole to give it as strong a connection as possible. As I said, I'm not going to use those. I'm just going to glue it on. So on the subject of glue, because have I taken it all apart? Yes, that's everything off the sprue, one clean sprue. I'm just going to toss that into the sea. No one won't affect anything there. Of course I won't, it'll go safely in my plastic disposal, and then the British government will ship it out to some sort of tropical island to dump it in the jungle. So here we have the model. I shall dry fit to see the thing going together. You know, I wonder if these things need clipping off in there, or if they're part of what holds the, no, they're part of what holds the head section on. So he's got two little pegs which will receive the head section into there. And then the only other dry fit section would be that one there. I mean, it's not very posable. If you did have two of these and you wanted one in a different position. Ah, so that's the claw. Okay, so that's interesting. That's how that claw goes on. It fits underneath there as a kind of and I said to myself when I saw it, I wondered why there were grooves there, but that's because that glues onto the base as well. So in fact, when this goes on to this base, it's going to have, actually now I'm thinking it won't fit. Anyway, if it did fit, it would have 3 points of contact, so that's going to be completely glued on there, fine. So you know what I think I'm going to do with this? I'm going to use, probably to avoid going that much bigger, I'm going to use one of these clear bases to build this out. So I will temporarily, once this is built, I will glue it onto this with a little bit of glue, but then I'm going to clip it off and eventually I'll put it onto a clear base, and you know, this one and one that's slightly larger than that would be fine in terms of fitting the whole thing on there. Right, so the glues, although there's more cleanup, that's the other thing really, is to just to have a look around to clean up anything that might be sticking out. So there's a small piece of, if I zoom in and you can see it there, just you get little bits like that that have come off and need clipping, just to clean it up. And then that's where I might take the blade as well, just to sort of trim into there. I mean, that's actually going to be underneath the model, but just to clean that up means that that's covered. And again, you can see The same thing happens on the side there. I have a little bit there, and again, when the blades don't work anymore because it's a very fine section like that, I just get in there with the blade, and that sort of smooths it out. In fact, you then don't really need to do anything. I mean, one technique, and I think they sell tools for this as well, is if you see a mold line, you can run a sharp blade along the edge to sort that out. Here's another section there. You can see now that one again just cleans off okay. Obviously this is sharp blade. Take care with it. I've said this before on a few videos of interest actually, that because I've been painting miniatures for 30 years and using sharp blades the whole time, I've now got I don't know, almost a magician's ability to avoid damage from a blade. How does that happen? I've no idea, but I quite often have this bump off a model, scour into me or stab towards me, and somehow it doesn't pierce my toughened hide. And don't ask me how that happens. I mean, my worst nightmare really with one of these would be to have a pair of just socks on or bare feet and have it slip off the table and then fall directly down into the top of my foot with all of its weight. That hasn't happened yet, so hoping it never will. Right, so that one's done. I can see again along the top shoulder there, that's just another bit of sprue. Add on the back of the claw. Probably gone a bit too strong there. You can go a bit too strong and you end up potentially taking too much off, but you can usually recover from that. There's another one underneath there. You see that one's just possibly good to be able to come off with a, because it's raised up. As you get older, you miss more of those bits as well. That is a challenge. You do these, you put it together afterwards, you spray on the primer and you go, oh no, I've missed an entire bump of sprue that's still protruding, or a mold line. Anyway, obviously with the news of the virus, there's potentially lots of time to be had indoors doing nerdy pursuits and painting and things like this. So I'm not isolated yet, but if that was to happen, it's going to be hobby time, big time. Oh, unless I'm working, of course, that's the other potential, is that you could be doing some remote spreadsheet maneuvering. So partly also feeling around as I go. I know he's got big spikes and things on anyway, but you can sort of feel where there might be a very rough edge when your eyesight's as bad as mine. So this one's going to have just as many bits that I haven't cleaned up fully. Doesn't look as bad actually, as long as it's come off the sprue without too many. Oh, there's one there, you can see. And they get quite clever in that the injection moldings these days, because they're 3D designing the models, they know long before they've got to the stage of making the master steel injection molded template, they already know where all the mold lines are going to be in terms of where the plastic is injected, and obviously from a design perspective, they're designing it to disguise those as much as possible as well. There's another bit. I thought I'd already done that bit. So that's where I do miss them, because you just have a little edge somewhere that looks like it's a spike or something to do with the miniature, and then before you know it, it's you've left it behind. Okay, another dry fit then. There's quite a few pegs on this to align. The other thing is, when you're dry fitting, you don't always want to push on too hard, because you may not be able to get it off, just as long as you can see that there's nothing along the seams. So yeah, that looks like it's going to go on fine. Head. Yeah, so obviously in regard to the virus, it's interesting, isn't it, how different countries respond, you know, and it's almost like that thing that they tell you at work sometimes, the whole change curve comes in, doesn't it? There's an initial little bit of denial, which is understandable, because these scares come around every 10, 20 years or so, don't they, in one form or another, and you hear it distantly on the news. I think social media brings them a lot closer, the remote news, and our incredible amount of air travel then brings that virus more rapidly to us. And it's understandable that initially people might deny or compare and contrast, don't they, to other stuff. I mean, it's a classic, it's all we've got as a human race, isn't it? Comparative nature. Oh, that's not quite like that, it's more like this, or I've seen this before and it's this shape. And that's a challenge, because it does sort of sometimes rubs people up the wrong way, doesn't it? Because they want to say it's nothing, others want to make a bigger deal, and then anyway people rush out and buy toilet roll by the truckload. You know, probably the same person that 3 weeks ago was saying this is nothing, they're now in the stores with a truck full of bog roll, which is probably understandable for some, but it does come over as a bit crazy. Yeah, so it's just a case of like fettling away. It's interesting, isn't it? Because as a model on a sprue like this, you kind of think, surely there's not that much work, because all you're doing is clipping it off. But you do have to take care to make sure you've got the various bits done on it. Okay, great, Peter, thank you. Half an hour into the conversation, I finally get the chat up, and Peter said it's a great model. Thanks for that. Now I can see that if you're on Facebook and you're on my profile and you see this and you want to fire abuse at me of any kind, just drop a message onto the Facebook stream and I'll see it now, rather than it being hidden away. The fear loss. Adam, thanks for posting. So there's my herd cow as well. I've put up a herd cow because obviously Boris wants the herd in the UK to build resistance to the virus, so I thought I'd add a little cow in there for that. And clearly it's one approach, isn't it? Let the infection spread. I was initially surprised at that. I'm not, the jury's out. I'm not totally convinced. I'm not in a position of denial on that, sort of saying, oh, it's stupid that he's letting the infection run its course. We should be locking everything down and slowing it as much as possible, because we know Italy has been overrun and their health services are in a terrible situation where they're struggling with it. At least we think so. The evidence is showing that it is. So we think, well, is it wise to let it go like that? Because it could get crazy. But I don't know. I mean, there's loads of factors, isn't there? We've got spring coming on, which traditionally curbs the enthusiasm of viruses like that. So yeah, it's going to be interesting how it plays out. Okay, so there he is. The head is nearly cleaned up. I mean, generally speaking, though, these are much easier to clean up than resin models, aren't they? The plastic, and probably easier than metals too. Although I don't mind. I don't have a problem. You know, there's quite often people are nowadays sort of, oh, I hate metals. I hate Trump. I like resin models. I don't like Boris Johnson. I like liberal models versus right-wing models, whatever it happens to be. They're really happy to shout their opinion, but I love them all, because yeah, I'm just a crazy modeler and have been dealing with every type of model for years, so quite happy to mess around with a resin model, and just as likely to be putting together a metal one. In fact, North Star, I'll show them on another video, but North Star, they do a lot of models for the what's that game, Frostgrave, and they're very interesting because they're so flexible that you could buy a female wizard sprue and a dwarf sprue, and for whatever reason you could even give a female wizard a dwarf arm and an axe, and it doesn't look that wrong. So I don't know how they've managed it, but that's a nice kit. And that's one thing with the game, some of these Games Workshop ones like this, is that these sort of push fit style are very much locked into one particular pose. Although you'd have to sort of seriously hack it apart when you to move that head. Look, that head is already in a position that it's going to sort of be shown to be curving towards one side. So I'm not going to clean up those little ones. I'm going to look at the claw, the foot claw. So yes, if you're unfamiliar with working with plastics like this, when you do sort of score down them, it does, obviously it sort of leaves a kind of almost like a sandpaper finish to it. I'm getting close to that. And as such, if you were really into models, extreme modeling, you might get some fine grain sandpaper and clean up as well, and just sort of work at that to make it perfect. For me, I don't go that far. I'm more interested in sort of more glaring. Let's zoom into that one. Hi, Ralph. More glaring bits of sprue that just need tidying up on there, because it'll all be hidden in the paint, because I'm not that much of an expert painter either, so it'll all be sort of hidden away eventually. I know I've seen techniques on Gundam plastic kits, the type of kits that these Tamiya modelling sprues or modelling clippers are often used for, and I've seen modelers with that. What they will do is they will do a big cleanup and sand the model, the Gundam kind of thing model, but then once they've sprayed and primed it, they'll go back on with sanding again to really get a fine finish. And so if that's if you've got the time for it and you're doing it for a showcase standard, you may want to do that. So, am I nearly ready to put this together? Right, so glues, I use the Tamiya glues as well. So I've got Yeah, they are GW pinholes, patronising or simply to avoid. Yeah, they can be annoying. There you go. So I've got this one is the extra thin, which goes into tiny little joints, and this is the kind of standard cement, and this one's very similar to the Games Workshop hobby cement. These I find I haven't got a Games Workshop one to hand, but I know the Games Workshop stuff often comes in kind of black pots and things like this. This is a clear parts window cement that I've got. But even with this and with others, I find it quite hard to keep the glue flowing, in that you put it away for a month or two, take it back out again, and it's clogged. And if you're happy to get these Tamiya ones, you'll never have that problem, because they are big old brush style, and they just work. And the nice heavy glass base on those means they are really solid on the desk as well. You're not going to knock it over easily. So lots of benefits of using Tamiya cement. I think it's great. And yeah, let's do it. Let's put the beast together a bit. So yeah, thanks Adam. Yeah, I'm working on my Grunts version too. I say I was planning to go to Salute. Obviously, I don't want to speculate on what's happening with Salute. It may go ahead or it may not go ahead. With the latest news today that the government have done a sort of mini U-turn on the fact that they weren't going to let public events happen. It's interesting actually. I think they've kind of let professional bodies like the sporting bodies make their own decisions on shutting down or whatever. Now, I would actually say I'm a bit suspicious of that. I almost think it's like, well, if the government don't say it, then it means that the insurance doesn't kick in one way or another, or the claims or the license or something, because then it allows whatever body involved to control their own licensing, etc., or event details. Whereas if it's government implied, that just says you're shutting your business down, because that's what it's going to be like for somewhere like Excel. Because I've been to lots of different shows at the Excel Centre as well, for various other non-miniature related events, and I mean they'll just be ruined by if the government turned around to Excel and said you cannot have any events. I mean, that's all they do. Yeah, staggering the immunity, which is interesting. Which is, building it up in the herd, isn't it? Let's get the cow back up for the herd again. See if it appears. There we go. But what do you do once you've been immune? You've got the immunity. I thought with a cold or corona style virus, and corona means crown because it's got a little crown head on the virus. I thought that you only keep it for 2 to 3 months, the immunity, like any cold, and then you get it again. So, I was very worried when I saw that the healthcare workers died earlier in the year in China, because I thought, why, if they're young and fit, is that because they've caught it a 3rd time or a 4th time and the virus has overloaded their system? We don't know. So, at the moment, jury's out, isn't it, in terms of understanding the virus's nuances in terms of reinfection. And that's the other thing I thought, when early on in the process, lots of people were kind of crying out and saying, oh, it's nothing, it's a cold, or it's the flu's worse, or more people die on banana slippages per day, or what have you. I did wonder if the 5th wave is the one that wipes us all out. Who knows? I think I'm ready to put that together. Oh, so Birmingham Games thing going ahead. Oh, that's good news. I think quite a lot of the American ones have been cancelled early. I mean, they get in early with that kind of thing. I don't know you know, I don't know if any American people are listening at the moment, or if they do watch this, but my impression of American event versus emergency things. I've been there. I've been in America when there's been hurricane type things in Florida and stuff, and I've seen the emergency response, and it's always really good and strong and sensible. And that's my impression of the American mindset, that you would think, even if it was a June event or a May event, you might go like, let's just get this cancelled because it's too risky. Because I think in the UK, I think I don't think it's necessarily right, but we might say we're going to go ahead with this, and our stiff upper lip and closed mouths will prevent any cross-infection. And again, I don't know what's right or wrong. I just sense that America, when they get going behind an emergency, respond very well and are quite coordinated. I'm not saying the UK aren't that, but I think we're a little less likely to be sort of enthusiastically organising ourselves. I may be just completely wrong there, but I just feel like we're slightly more likely to just brush it aside and go, we'll still get together. Now, what's wrong? What's different about those two approaches is potentially there's no difference in them. In that, yes, you shut down a few events and you may slow the inevitable spread to people that are going to get very ill, but you may not really change it. It may not be that drastically different, which is difficult to know at this point. And my feeling is the UK government thought, let's get this over with in one quick hit, and therefore overload our systems, which are not going to be able to cope very well, but at least it's then all out of the way, rather than a steady drip of issues that may last much, much longer. So I'm gluing the pegs on the basis that I'm going to push fit it together with those pegs, and then I'm going to do the other seam lines with the fine glue. So it's not like a complete shutdown there. That's annoying me on that seam there. Like, it's just a tolerance thing that you're pushing it together, and it's not that it's not sticking inside. Those pegs will be welding together. You see, that arm is perfect as the way that's gone together. Really well designed. See, there's a seam line as well. It's very hard to see along there. I'll show you close up if anybody's interested. A bit closer. Yeah, clamps and liquid cement. I could also use have I got any clamps around me? I could use an elastic band as well, couldn't I? But yeah, there's an example of a bit that you could deal with, and that's that there's like a seam before the edge of the head, and I think if you airbrushed and washed that would appear, and that's the sort of thing where I should really take a knife to it carefully. I'm not going to have time on this video because I'm not going to keep going on forever. I'll just put it together, but that's already sort of cleaned that off to a kind of a Mr. Basic standard. I've cleaned the seam off there. But if you were being careful, and with this being such an expensive model as well, I will probably another time take a little bit of fine sandpaper along there to just blend that edge in to sort out the fact there's a mould line. I mean, it's such a mild mould line that it's not really a biggie. That's better if I zoom in there now. You can see where it was, and that there's still a little bit of mess down there behind that proboscis thingy. paint wise on this, I've not really thought of what to do. I was going to airbrush it. I had in mind looking in. My son used to be into beetles and things. We used to go to. There's a national bug fair once a year in November, and it's in a race course, and I can't remember where it is. It's like West London, and I've always wondered what the cleaners do at the end of the day when they find a tarantula roaming around, because literally this race course events convention centre is full of scorpions, tarantulas, deadly this, that and the others. I mean, probably there's a legal limit, isn't it? You can't take black widows and things to a family event because there's kids and stuff allowed in. But you can buy all these insects and stuff there at the show. And so why am I going this direction in my conversation? Well, because potentially I could airbrush this and give it some of that jeweled look. There's a book called, I can't remember if it's The Jewels of Insects or something, which is a nice book we got my son when he was younger that has all these amazing insects with a sort of jewel-like look to them. And I may go for some sort of shiny result like that, like a shiny carapace. Right, I'm talking too much, and I should now I've cleaned that up, I should now do another dry fit on this, just to see that's going in. Now, see, that seam up there is going to need some work, I think, once it's gone together. Yeah, it doesn't even want to push fit right. Yeah, that is going to need... Well, if I glue along the seam, it could do it. It could do it. I'm wondering there if that's something to do with the fact that there's I could clean these pegs up a bit just to let it in a bit further. Okay, so I'm narrowing the peg down a bit, but that shouldn't affect the glue or anything. I'm just hoping that it'll be a cleaner fit right to the back of the model. View from the turret. No, that's not in. It's not used in grunts. I could use this in grunts as a kind of a beast. I did. There was a game called Monster Apocalypse by Privateer Press, and they did some. I mean, they were like micro scale, but the beasts were about this size, and I painted a few of those, used them at a show game as sort of monsters, alien monsters in the grunt skirmish game, on the basis that, you know, you have those sort of mega monsters like that. What's that movie called? Creature from Id, or Forbidden Planet, which is an invisible kind of beast, which was meant to be made up of the fears of all the people there, wasn't it? But there was still a good combat with some laser fire. Yeah, that is just simply bugging me, because even though I've not glued it on, there is a tendency for that seam to come apart. And it also glaringly, although it's kind of carapace-like, it does show that seam line. Even when that's glued, I'm going to have to maybe put some putty in there just to finish it off and sand it down, which surprised me, because from a build perspective, if I was designing this, I would have said to the 3D guys, make the top one overlap the bottom carapace in your design, and then when that push fitted on there, you'd be hiding the seam under an overhang. So that is a fail. Right, I'm not bothered trying this out. No. So there you go. So yeah, it takes quite a long time, doesn't it? Traditionally, I may, if I wasn't talking, just whack this together really quickly, but it is quite important to try and sort of test those edges and things. I don't have anything to hand like a elastic band, so I'm not prepared. So I'm going to glue it on the basis that I'm going to have to come back to it and clamp it, as Adam said there, to because I think if I put some along that edge, along the back, even though I put a tiny amount, I don't think it's going to hold it. But we'll see. Let's go for it. It may hold it on. You can see along the edge there I've squeezed a little bit of the glue out. This is where, just for technique wise, if anybody's watching this, yeah, those new Monpoc, the Monster Apocalypse models, are really, really nice. I've seen some really good paint jobs of those. The rules to Monster Apocalypse, now this is interesting. If you remember Magic the Gathering, and then games such as Robo Rally, which is Richard Garfield, something tells me, I'm not 100% sure, that he was behind some of the rules in Monster Apocalypse. I'm using my left hand to do this. This is not wise, but, you know, I'm not left-handed. But I don't want to release that grip because I'm holding that weld together on the back there. So this is how the thinner glue works. It's more like a capillary action. It gets drawn into the small joints, and I quite often use it like this, in that the model will already be together, and then I'm looking at a joint that I want to glue or add just more glue and get it sucked into the joint, and the capillary action will suck that in. So yeah, I often do that at the last stage. Oh, at least one of us is working on grunts, yeah. Well, I'll be back in the garage tomorrow, actually, working on the terrain layout. I've got a friend of mine, John, coming around, and we are congregating. Mind you, it's in like an airy garage, so hopefully we won't be coughing on each other too much, and lots of fist pumping. That probably sounded wrong, actually. Yeah, lots of conversation, cups of teas, and gluing of things onto terrain bases. So right, it's coming together rather nicely. Well, not that there was a lot to it, it's just push fit, isn't it, really? Was there anything I missed on this piece? I don't think so. I think that's ready to go. Yeah, so I did say earlier I'm going to base this on a clear base, which I have a few. Don't have one to hand, but this is what I've been doing quite recently with models, is putting them on a clear base. Not all the time. I'm pretty flexible. I like them, especially like a genie coming out of a smoke pile. Kind of works, doesn't it? Because whatever terrain you put him on, it's going to look like the smoke is coming out of the ground or what have you, even though there's a little pile and a genie lamp down there. But you've got to get special glue for this, and I haven't got the glue to hand. It's in the garage at the moment, but it's absolutely lethal. It's basically the kind of glue you need to use these acrylic bases. It's the same as these Tamiya cement, but it's a whole level up. It's like it's filth. It actually will. I dropped some on the floor or something in the garage last week, and we all shouted that it's going to like burn through like aliens, because it is really strong stuff. And what it does is it melts the acrylic, which I've got here, the glue. So anything will glue to it, because even though that's metal onto acrylic, the glue has made the acrylic totally melt into like a molten bubble underneath. Then you squeeze the model onto it, and it's glued on forever. So yeah, that's the benefit, is that you get a nice clear base like that, but you have to use the special glue, and I haven't got that to hand to show you. I can't even remember what it's called. But they often go by names of like acrylic welding or acrylic welder, and just not advisable to use indoors at all, because it really does melt the stuff through, and if you get it on your hands it really stings as well. So I'm wondering, do you put the fist on first and then the thing over the top? Probably do. Let's see. Yes, that's the way to do it, because it sort of builds up the body. Okay, so I think that's ready to go on there. I don't think there's any, because that's not on show, even though there's a little bit sort of hidden away. So I'll get the cement on that peg. I put loads on there, but never mind. It's all behind the scenes. You see that's gone about as high up as it's going to go. And that provides the third base touch point really underneath, which makes it a really steady model in terms of having three points on the ground. So I know that's going to be fine to go on as well with the push fit for the arms, the arm front. We are nearly done. And when you do put the glue on, the push fit's much easier as well. It's kind of obviously lubricating the joint until it's glued. It's good. So I've been maintaining pressure the whole time on this joint at the top, and it has glued it together, although it has left a seam, which probably could do with a could have done with it's going to do with some putty on there. I haven't got my putty stuff with me, but I've got some, you know, you can use what's called green stuff for that, which is like a 2-part epoxy, and then roll it in and then sand it down later. Or you can get some putty that comes from Tamiya. These guys do it. It's like a model kit. It's like a white paste in a tube, almost like toothpaste. And I would just use, I haven't got it on me, but I would just use a tiny amount of it and then smear it through the line. And then even maybe leave a little bit proud, but then I would then sand it off afterwards with a little bit of sandpaper, very fine grade, to sort of make the unevenness go away. But yeah, as far as push fit models go, that's not a bad. I can see there's some movement there, very little though. Again, I could go back to the skinny, the thin Tamiya, and just trace it into areas where I think it could do with a bit of extra glue in there. That's a lot on there now. That's going to suck up into that joint. Capillary action at work again. Yeah, that's a good idea, Adam. Yeah, a little bit more liquid cement, leave it, and soften. It will soften, and then you can score across the seam as well. Yeah, that is another way that I could sort of score across the seam. It will join it, and liquid cement will melt the sides together. Yeah, I'm just holding that fast. I think that's gone. That's gone good. Right, so probably the only way I'm going to stand him up is by using this. So there's a cheeky thing. Obviously, back in the day, these bases used to be very standard, and the pegs underneath. And in fact, this guy's got a peg, although I think I've taken it off as well. But yeah, the pegs underneath the models were usually like a standard size. Clearly, that's a much bigger one and fits on the new Games Workshop base. But it doesn't go in there. You'd have to sort of trim it down. In fact, I was going to clip that off anyway, and I'm going to do that now. Yeah, that's fired off somewhere around the room. It's another classic wargamer issue that if you're not careful when you're painting away and crafting, you end up with bits of stuff flying everywhere. So, in actual fact, I think I will base him on here, because you put it at the back of the base. The 2 feet do fit. Let's get that steady. The 2 feet do fit, and then it just looks like the fist is resting on the edge of the curved base. And very dynamic model. Great. It's going to take an airbrush. I still don't know what to do about these well, I call them honeycomb sections. Some people have sort of that reaction to these things, don't they, where there's like eyes inside things. I don't think I'm going to make them glow like honey or anything, because the figure, let's have a look on the yeah, it does look quite well balanced as a model, Adam. Yeah, well, compared to the old school one, which obviously a little stubby guy, yeah, there's a lot more going on there. But let me go to the Raspberry Pi and have a look. Wiggle the mouse. Yeah, so yeah, they've done them like honey, those little holes. That's the impression I get off that anyway. I look at it and I think, oh, it looks like it's kind of got like insects that have left honey-like pods with their maggots in that are growing inside it. That's my impression. But I wouldn't do it in a honey colour, I don't think. Maybe green or something a little bit more. But that nice white underbelly with the blue dark on the back, definitely going to go for a look sort of like that. A kind of a whitish, lighter underbelly with a darker carapace. Looks like it would work. So go back to the real thing. Seal-faced Umber Hulk. Still fun though. Yeah. Yeah, the old one with a funny little tube on the front. Yeah, this one, I spent a little bit of time, not that long, because this was a repaint. So basically I had him on an old base and he'd been in the garage and was just painted black. So I got hold of it and I thought, what should I do? Strip it? And I thought, I can't be bothered. So I just went over the black with a kind of a bluish colour. And then with the eye, I just put some clear acrylic gloss on the eye after I painted it with that. A little bit of eye colour on both sides, and a couple of layers of acrylic gloss on the eye to make it shine. But the rest of it I barely painted. As you can see, it's got a sort of dark blue. In many ways similar blues to the one, the modern one that you just saw. Just got some muck on there. And then the base has just been done. In fact, the base, just observationally, if I can get the base in focus, you can see I put little oak leaves on there. And they're glued on with a bit of PVA glue. And there's a maple leaf as well. And some little crumbs. These crumbs actually are off my driveway, off sticks and things. And I put them in a blender. I saw someone do it on the internet, on YouTube. Basically, they took a bullet style blender, one of those things that can really tear up nuts and things like that. Stuck some bits of sticks in my own little blender pod, so I wasn't ruining the kitchen one, and then blasted it. So quite like doing that, really, using a bit of debris from a twig in the garden, blitzing it, and then dropping it on there for sort of realism. However, those little leaves, those are a kit thing that I got. I've got one over here actually. The leaves on the base, I just little tiny kit I bought. I picked these up at a show. I think it was Salute a couple of years ago. I mean, all they are is punched out bits of paper stained brown in the shape of a leaf. But they look nice on a 28mm base anyway, and they kind of give you a little bit of realism on there, along with a couple of tufts. So yeah, I don't know what I'll do with the base on this one. I might give it a more of a dungeon style to it. I've got an example of a dungeon base I've done recently. So I haven't finished this model yet, but it's a iron golem. I think it's an iron golem. It's from Otherworld Miniatures, so he's been put together, primed, and then the base itself, which is a bit dark down there. But I used some polymer clay stuff that's gone in the oven, and where I put the impression of the tile work on there and then baked it, and then I've just put him on that base. In fact, he's got his metal tab right through the base. They're giving him, because he's metal, he's really heavy, and so he's had his primer and one shade of highlight added on, which I need to finish him because I was going to pre-shade him before I made him. I'm trying to remember, is he a bronze golem or a metal golem? I can't remember. Whatever he is, he needs doing. But I put this front foot, I made it look like it was cracking through the flagstones, like he's heavy enough metal to sort of crack a flagstone down there, and a couple of other bits of debris on the base, so like a shield. Yeah, it's a Harryhausen tribute style. I don't know who sculpted it, but it's Otherworld Miniatures. I'll tell you what though, with Otherworld Miniatures, they do obviously a whole range of models, and sometimes they can feel a bit expensive for their individual 28mm. And then this guy was, I think he was about £15 or something. But I was expecting something half the size, and then this absolute monster of metal that you could, defend yourself against a food riot with something of this size in your fist came along. So really nice model. But that flagstone style base is probably what I'll aim for this guy. He's going to go on the same size of base and similar size of model, isn't it? So that's the Umber Hulk, and Yeah, and that's I think it's an iron golem. I think it's an iron golem, and I was going to give it brown rust once I've done the kind of shades of iron on there. It has the hand looks a bit like the whole Marvel Universe guy in terms of how the fist's been done. If it had a few crystals on the back of that wrist there, it would look very much the same. But yeah, it's a nice, nice model, and I like particularly the chin, looking at that kind of metal chin in there. A quick observational look at that. So back to the black magic, back to there's the model painted, and me. That's it. Oh, and I haven't got the text chat's gone from here as well. That is annoying. Where's it gone? Alert box chat. There it is. Oh, it's a different chat. Oh no, it's the same one. So yeah, so thanks very much, and also the cow, the herd will say goodbye as well if that herd comes up. Yep. And thanks very much for listening. And so if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, thanks for listening, and please subscribe and like and everything. And I appreciate you spending your time.